Hey guys, so today we are going to talk about reverse engineering. So let's get into it. Reverse engineering, oh dear God, reverse engineering. I have to give you context. I'm sorry guys, but you're gonna have to bear with me. So reverse engineering, I have had the truly unfortunate situation where twice in my career, today being the second one, where I have had to perform reverse engineering on something. Let's talk about the first time I had to do it and why it was so horrible. So for the juniors out there, reverse engineering, it can mean many different things. In the context of our little discussion here, it's going to mean trying to figure out how a system that you do not own works so that you can do something with it. So in the first scenario, I was working on a Flash application for a fairly large, or let's just say a very, very large company with a Flash module on their main webpage that is business critical to their entire product. And somehow, over the years, I actually, to this point, I could not, I really tried to figure out who had the source code to the Flash module. Because somebody had built it. I knew that much. I knew that the company owned the product. It was not an external company who was like providing this Flash module thing. It was built by the company. But whoever I asked, I asked my manager, I asked my manager's managers, and I asked even that managers, something like that. And nobody could tell me who the hell knew where the source code was for this thing. No one knew where it was. Nobody even could answer the question, who owns this? Who maintains this product? And the answer I usually got was that, well, no one really. Okay, I thought, all right, I can deal with this, because unfortunately at the time I was in a scenario where I literally had to figure out how something extremely complicated worked. Basically, you had a domain-specific configuration file that really only made sense to the people who built this thing. And in order for you to understand what all the different abbreviations and values, because there was tons of data, tons of different magical values that had some meaning to how the behavior of this application or this module actually, how it somehow it affected how everything was being run, right? So the only option I had was to do the thing that I hope that you will never have to do yourself. And that is to run a compiled program through a decompiler and try to walk through a project with not only code that you have no way of asking anybody what it means, but it also doesn't necessarily have any semantic class names, because a decompiler usually doesn't, it's very rare that you can get the exact source code back when you decompile something. And when you're in that situation, just as I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. You just have to live with it. You just have to do what you can to figure out what everything means. Usually sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not, because it's literally, it is really, really tricky to reverse engineer something. Depending of course on the size of it. What's even worse is when you have to reverse engineer something like an external network type of thing. If you have an external API, that is really, really horrible. If you have to reverse engineer the interactions that are required for that API to perform in the way that you want, which is what I was doing today. Basically, there was an issue with one of the external APIs that we depend on, and I spoke to my colleagues and said, we have a bug here, I need to fix this, how do I fix it? And I said, well, that's a problem. And I kind of went, well, what do you mean? Why is this a problem? Well, because the way that we use this specific API is maybe a little bit different from what you're used to. And I said, okay, what do you mean? Well, we may have reverse engineered a Android application to figure out how the network interaction, how the client to server interaction with the API was working so that we could use that directly from our application. Okay, so what you're telling me is that I have to download the API provider's app, decompile the Java code, the bytecode, to basically back to class files and then to Java files. I basically decompile it back to Java code and then just walk through how it all works. Yeah, pretty much that's what you're gonna have to do. And so that's what I've been doing today. I have been decompiling Java code to walk through logic and zipping through an Android project to figure out how all of this fits together. Thank God for this is the one time I truly am grateful that there are conventions, because I actually do have a bit of Android development experience. I have worked with Android for a little while, and I have been doing a fair bit of that sort of programming. So I know that if it's a network, because thank God it wasn't something more complicated than the network layer, because just the interactions between the API and all of that stuff, you're fairly certain that that sort of information is going to be stored in the resources folder alongside with the strings and the other XML configurations that you find in an Android project. Said and done, I went there, I checked it out, and I found where the information I needed was, basically. And tomorrow I'm going to see if I can fix this, because basically that's how it took a great deal of effort to figure out how everything fit together. And finally I had such luck that the API had there was an error coming back, basically with an obscure error code. And thank God that the app, I was so lucky, guys. When you have, unless you have tried to reverse engineer something truly complex, you cannot possibly understand how grateful I am that I got this lucky. Because don't kid yourself. If you have an application that, or an API or something like that, that is not designed for the thing that you're doing with it, and you have reversed engineered it in order to make it work, you are taking a massive gamble. Because trust me, and especially if you build a business on top of it, because if that API or if the interaction changes in an unforeseeable way, which makes the exploit or the reverse engineering solution that you have made, if that becomes unfeasible, then you're dead in the water, because you're doing something that you're technically not supposed to be able to do. The product that you are reverse engineering is not intended to necessarily work in that way. You're taking a really big risk, and you should be aware of that. But as I said, thank God that I found that there was an error code coming back from the server that mapped perfectly to a translation file in the Android project, which had a very nice little translated string that explained that, oh, your API version is out of date. That was it, basically. All the issues, all this error had come basically from that the API provider had updated their versions, and when you are reverse engineering somebody or something, you don't get notified that has changed, because the intention is not for you to do that in the first place, even though you can. So, to summarize, reverse engineering, things that will help you reverse engineer things. Number one, first and foremost, be really good at understanding network traffic, most of the debugging and so forth. If you're doing something with an external source, make sure that you have a network traffic analyzer. I personally use Squid or Squidman, if you will. There's also Wireshark, stuff of that nature. So you can check the network traffic that is coming back and forth. You can even, if you have an online app or something like that, you can look at the network requests there, look at the packages going back and forth, because usually what happens is that when you then look at the client side of the code, when you have a decompiler, for example, if you have a compiled application such as an Android or an iOS device or something like that, you decompile the source code because you actually do have all the code in your hand if it's on your phone. And there's plenty of projects that will help you decompile it. And what usually the way to approach this is to decompile it and just look for string matches, see if you can find the different endpoints and start there. But a word of warning, guys, avoid reverse engineering unless you know exactly what you're doing, because it is really, really tricky. Have a great day.